When we were in COVID, we were just going from, one change to the next, one crisis to the next, because we had fires, we had floods, and then we had pandemic in between. We had rolling crises for, 3 years. And it was exhausting. Where we can do better in the government sphere is deal with the fragmentation. It's confusing for people to deal with government. We learned that there were people that lied to us, and there's a lot of us that are very angry about that. For our customers, for our staff who had to go through it, and then for everyone who was mopping up when it blew up, there was just so much unnecessary stress and angst. That for us, there were people knew at the time when the whole country's eyes were on it at the start of January 2017, and the plug could have been pulled then, and it wasn't. Yeah, there's a lot of anger about that.
Welcome to the GovComms podcast, bringing you the latest insights and innovations from experts and thought leaders around the globe in government communication. Now, here is your host, David Pembroke.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to GovComms, a podcast about the practice of communication in government and the public sector. My name is David Pembroke. Thanks for joining me. Today, part 2 of our conversation with Bevan Hannan, who is one of Australia's leading experts in government communications and the General Manager of Communication at the giant Australian agency Services Australia. Now, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, perhaps hit pause now and jump back and have a listen to that, because part 2 will make a whole lot more sense if you've listened to part 1. So last week we looked back, and a lot of it was focused on talking to Bevan about his history and where he'd come from and what he'd learned, particularly the role of mentors in his career and how he had picked up a lot of great advice from people by being curious, by being engaged, and by being willing to learn. So it was a really good conversation last week, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this week as well as we get more into the detail of the work of Services Australia and some of the stories from Bevan's time. Bevan, in fact, joined Services Australia in around the early 2000s, and indeed one of the very first projects that he was involved in was the hideous Bali bombing. Now, for those of you who may not be aware of it, it's one of Australia's greatest tragedies. Terrorist attack at Kuta, at the nightclubs in Bali, killed around 202 Australians, injured another couple of hundred Australian people, and really a horrendous mark in Australia's history. So Bevan was involved in the Australian government whole of response, and this is where we start part 2, where he starts to reflect on those times and indeed what that taught him in terms of his role of communications.
When that happened and the whole of government response happened after the initial bombings, and part of that was our agency was supplying social workers, and they went offshore to help with some of the response to that. And there were a range of government payments that were set up for victims and their families, and the then Centrelink agency, was delivering those and obviously had a role in communicating all of that. Where I really came into play was for the first year anniversary. So there was one of our head social worker was put in charge of a family support team that had cross government from the coppers to the Foreign Affairs. There was a whole range of agencies that were involved, some of the padres from Defence. And she set up a team, and she came to me and said, look, might need to come because I think there's going to be a lot of media interest in this and we're going to need some help. But if you come, it's on the proviso, you're part of the team and you're on our roster, you're on our 24-hour roster, and we're going to allocate you families. And so, part of my role was the communication side, but also playing a role in supporting families because as they went over there for the anniversary, they needed support and guidance while they were there. And so there was a dual role. And there was a gap between when the Prime Minister got there and the lead up. Lots of media from all over the world were there, and the families were the talent. And so I was the buffer between the families and the talent, and there was a lot of pressure for all the media that were there to get stories. And so grieving families and friends, and so difficult for them, and some of them were just so, what's all this, what are all these cameras for? And so to have someone who had some skill to help them, and to help them say no if they had to say no, or to help them be involved if they wanted to be, it just really showed me I've actually got some skills that can help people who need it, who don't have, who aren't familiar with this world. That was important, but even more so was the work I was doing on the phones, and when families needed help, and there was one person in particular just wanted me to sit with them on the night of the anniversary, because I knew their brother who had passed as well, and he wanted to be with someone who knew him, and so for me that just showed me it's a bigger purpose here, and I knew this is probably what I want to do.
It is interesting, isn't it, about that media management piece? What advice do you have to people to be an effective manager of media, to, again, better be able to explain policy, program, services, regulation?
You're better to be in the story than not, and you can control your presence. Don't leave it for someone else to do. And it's just making those decisions that allow you to be in the story and explain your position, whatever it is, or whatever that explanation is. And sometimes, it might be an interview, sometimes it might be a statement, but whatever it is that you can do to be in that story up front, so you're not chasing it and when there's a mistake later. I will say this, though, is that with much more publication being online, it is much easier these days to correct stories than it was previously. Like, to get a correction in a printed version of the paper was...
Good luck.
Yeah, but now it's online. Like, there's, most journos, there's if I've got it wrong here, I'll fix it. So that's good. But the premise should be, don't be chasing, be in it.
Now, as you say, you have a 200-person team, a great heritage of content and communication in Services Australia. Previously, the Department of Human Services, I think it was under Sue Varden's leadership, they created studios where they used to broadcast into the offices around Australia. So it's something that DHS and now Services Australia has got for a long time. But take us on that journey of while you've been there, from that early 2000s to now, and really, the capability and the content capability that you've been able to develop, both from a platform point of view, from a content point of view. You really have built a media capability that can explain the stories that you need to explain.
Yeah. That's probably the next bit of that story, about how we can talk about the simpler times, but it's actually better for communicators now as well. Like, the fragmentation, okay, it's a challenge, but we know now better than we ever did. We were guessing before about what our reach was and are we successful, are we hitting the mark. We know now we've got much better, richer data. And plus we've got our own channels we can use, and not just our channels. We've got our partners' channels that we can use too, where we've got mutual constituents. And, in the old days, we were reliant on the media telling the story for us. We don't need that anymore. So we're in a far better position, I believe, than we were, in those simpler times. And we've got some deep experience, and when we started with the studio back in those early Centrelink days, it was a satellite TV broadcast. Yeah, that's how if you needed it, training was done that way. It was the only way you could get people together at the one time. But then, as technology's improved, it's much easier to do on-demand stuff now. But which is why cashing in on COVID for all of the, we'd never want to go through that again from a communication practitioner's point of view. There are lasting legacies there, and that all of us have been trying to cash in on that have been real turning points. And apart from what I mentioned earlier, the captains of government and industry knowing what good comms looks like now, and insisting that we're there at the start. We're not add-ons anymore. We're the expectation is we're at the start. They know we can add value and make things work, and make successful implementations if the communication's right. That's a benefit. But the technological changes were certainly beneficial, and we made a hell of a lot of changes in that time that we are still benefiting from now and building on. And probably, part of that space was when we were in COVID, we were just going from, one change to the next, one crisis to the next, because we had fires, we had floods, and then we had pandemic in between. We had rolling crises for, 3 years. And it was exhausting. But geez, we made some progress in that time. And one of those great bits of progress was the testing, and it made some of our business partners open to some of the testing and testing of content that we were doing, and making changes to how we were coming up with guided content for people so they could more quickly understand what they needed to do, particularly digitally and on websites when people couldn't get out of the house, and culminating with things like bridging links in that guided content, so it would take them right to the task that they needed to do in the authenticated space, rather than having to click 5 million times and get frustrated going around in circles. So there's a real openness on that. And so in the midst of all of the pandemics and crisis, our great web team, they launched a new website in 2021. The reaction to that from the public has been outstanding. I've just seen a report in the last couple of days that's coming out shortly from the Northern Hemisphere, where we've been a part of a study, and the UK has always been the benchmark for the digital, government digital.
Yep.
It's ranking us as far as usability and customer experience 4 out of 5, just like UK.
Okay.
And it's a testament to what these guys in our web area did, and they did it, during that crisis time. And from that we've been able to build on that in the MyGov space from what they've leveraged there. And some of the benefits of COVID, where we were having to work with state governments on the COVID vaccination app, because that was the key to opening up the economy again. And there was a hell of a lot of consultation that was done, because there were different rules in different states and different requirements. So there was so much consultation had to be done to pull that off. And so the foundations that were laid there during that flowed through to what we had to do with MyGov. We're now looking at things not so much in those silos, but in that more whole of government lens. There's much more to do, but there's certainly been great strides, and COVID was a real turning point for communicators.
So in terms of your kingdom, if I could call it that, 200 people, what does it look like? Where are the different people, and what are the tasks that they're doing on a particular day? And how are you looking at that over time in terms of continuing to test and learn, to improve, and to become more effective?
Yeah, look, really blessed, Benby. We've got that whole team. It's a fabulous team, deep experience, and a lot of creative talent in there. And I'll tell you a little bit about how it's broken up. But like a couple of examples of things they've done, which makes me really proud of them. We've got a couple of staff, Dawn and Matt, who did a lot of work in Northern Territory. And one of the things that they've put in place in the last couple of years is in-language communication in service centres in the Northern Territory, so Indigenous in language.
Yep.
So that we've got there's a whole range of Indigenous languages, but they've worked with local staff, but also more importantly local elders to get the messaging right and understood. And those communities can turn up to our service centres there, and when they're sitting waiting to be served or whatever they might be doing, the messaging that's playing is in language, and the feedback has been superb. And that's an initiative that comes from a couple of really talented people in our team. Another example with our website, we had a frontline staff member. He had an idea. He said, look, because people who are dealing with customers on the phone, they're often trying to guide them through the website to say, go here to find this, and to guide them where they might need to be and understand what they might be claiming for or seeking information on. And they said, it'd be really good if we had some sort of number on the pages so we could just tell them what number to put in. So our guys went away, had a look at that. And so now on our website, we've got a thing called quick codes, apart from the home page, but every other page has got a little number. And so when a service officer is dealing with a staff member, it's this page here, here's a quick code, and you type it in and bang, the page comes up. So it shows you how they're being responsive to feedback we're getting from the front line as well. Really talented people in our team. It ranges from production and editing through to design work, speech writers, event coordinators. We've got our media managers, but we've also got social media accounts where our social media responders are actually dealing with people, with our customers who have got questions and perhaps looking for a steer which might save them from having to visit or call. So there's that frontline interaction happening. We've got our customer communication activities happening so that our customers know what they need to do and what the latest changes are. But some of the work is even down to a little bit of straddling old school, because there's still, while there's a fair bit of digital, there's still a little bit of the old school left, like in the logistics and printing area. There's still doctor surgeries, need pharmaceutical scripts and pads, to write those out. And so we help coordinate those. But it's a broad ranging remit, and they do a good job. As I say, it's a tribute to the leaders of things, but we're also well supported. We're in a real sweet spot. My deputy CEO is a lady called Susie Smith, who's a former communications background. She's a great support. Then Hank is in our leadership team as well. So Hank Yonkin, and with a sounding board like that and that experience, like we've got a really strong team and a really committed group of people who, the uniting thing is anyone who works at services, they want to help the community, and that's what drives drives our people and do their very best to make the experience better.
Yeah, massively powerful mission. And again, you mentioned a lot of those names. They've been with you, well, part of that team for a long time as well. And you mentioned leadership and experience before as an important contributor to culture and to performance. And I think you'd have to, having those people around, talented people around for as long as you've had, has obviously been a significant contributor to building the effectiveness of that team.
Yeah, and it's all tied in with the master plan, Pemby. So
the master plan.
Yes, the organisation has a master plan, and so there's 4 principles. So it's simple, helpful, respectful, transparent. They're our building blocks for Services Australia. That's what we want everything to be, and with the mission of making government services simple so people can get on with their lives. And that's the unifying point. If there's 4 words that are going to be recited in our organisation, it's the simple, helpful, respectful, transparent.
Yep.
Everyone knows them, and we're committed to that. And so from a communications point of view, we've got 3 key streams of work. One is to help customers progress. So you'll see in our branding, we've got a fast forward symbol, but it's to designate progress, helping people progress. So it's to help customers progress, to help our staff progress, but then to help build understanding and awareness of how we help people progress. So in other words, so people understand what services do and have trust in what we do. And we have a quarterly process where we come up with our priorities. We know what our priorities are. We circulate them and discuss them with our business partners, and it's all transparent and visible across the organisation. We send it out. Here's our next quarter. This is what we're focused on. Here's the priorities, and it all lines up with corporate plans and what the organisation is doing. And there's absolutely, if we have someone come to us saying, "Oh, we need you to do this," well, if we can, but is it on our priorities list, and is it really a priority? And so it really does help our communications professionals in how they're dealing with our business partners, saying, well, it's pretty clear what our priorities are. We're not quite sure that is, but if there's a change we need to make, we can look at it, but it empowers them to be able to stick to the high value work and not get distracted by unnecessary requests.
Now, Services Australia, the comms team really has been for a long time the gold standard. And I think, as you've explained to us, it really is, it's great to hear that integration is working, that client-led, inspired, motivated, that ability, that humility to go, yeah, that's a good idea. Good ideas can come from anywhere. Let's try that. Let's spin it up. Let's build the capability and then let's deliver. Not everybody is quite as high-performing as Services Australia in this particular space. So as a sort of a senior communications person in the Australian government, what's your observations? You mentioned COVID on a number of occasions, but looking at it now, what do you see as where we are in terms of that maturity in being able to better explain policy, program, service and regulation? Because really that is the job of the public service. It's not to advocate. That's the job for the politicians. It is the job to explain. So where do you think we're at in Australia at the moment in terms of government communication?
Yeah, look, and I'll talk from a service delivery prism, and there's a lot of talk about trust in government, and there's a big focus in the public service about rebuilding trust in government, and a lot of that stems from an issue we were heavily involved in robo-debt, which was a subject of a Royal Commission last year, and that trust in government, we've got a huge role to play in that because we're the one dealing with the millions of Australians every day. We have 10 million interactions with customers every week. Our knowledge is that experience that precedes trust. And for us from that service delivery prism, I think where we can do better in the government sphere is deal with the fragmentation. It's confusing for people to deal with government. And I'll give you an example. There was one of the IT publications did some awards last week, and one of the categories was innovation in government. And there were 3 government finalists, and one of them was from our organisation, and 2 of the finalists were apps. Now, neither of the apps won the prize, but to me that illustrated, are we really simplifying things for people? I think there seems to be this proliferation and everyone building their own thing. And are we really thinking about the customer, the citizen, the journey they have, and are we really simplifying it? I think all of us have got some work to do there, more of that road to hoe.
But it's interesting, you did raise the point earlier around that effectiveness of third-party channels as something that you do rely on to get your message out there, and you also did refer to improvements in whole-of-government approaches. And crises are great, and obviously COVID was a crisis where the government did have to come together and the APS did have to come together to work together. But do you feel that there's been a regression away from that, or that there's not enough of a drive to think citizen at the centre, what's their needs, and then who do we need to join up to that? And how can we work together?
Yeah, I think it's there in the rhetoric. I think it's in the implementation of it. And our organisation's really, really invested in not building their own fiefdoms. Are they really interested in this and committed to it? And I think it's on the agenda.
Yeah.
But
it also comes from our system of government as well. You know, our cabinet system of government with ministers, and ministers have responsibilities and all those other things as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it comes to consistency with that too. And like, you know, you talk about channels that you have to work with. And also, look, we're very fortunate. The last two CEOs we've ever got, a new CEO, David Hazelhurst, and communications is like of high importance to him. We've been engaged from him. He started this year, and couldn't be happier with the engagement we've had with him to help introduce him to the community and our stakeholders, and our staff, more importantly. And our previous CEO, Rebecca Skinner, you know, was a similar ilk. But then you look at where does the minister come into things, and I've worked with 20 plus, so I've seen a few, and various things you see. Like I remember in the early days, Senator Amanda Vanstone was our minister, and she loved her public interaction, and you know she used to ring me for a chat about and a debrief on the headlines we were putting on her media releases. You know, like so she was invested and encouraging with that. But you know, I've been in ministerial offices where you know there's something uncomfortable about to happen, and they're smashing the table, wanting a head on a platter. We are fortunate as well, as part of our current sweet spot is our minister is Bill Shorten, a former opposition leader in Australia, and he values communication, and he's also probably one of the most active and visible in this government. And so not only does it give us an advocate, it gives us a channel to use, but it boosts morale, Pemby, because if you're working for someone and serving a minister who isn't confident in their public engagement, there's a lot of busy work and a lot of work that goes nowhere. But if you've got someone who is confident and has got a big appetite and has smarts about you know how they're messaging and when they're doing it, it's a lift not only to the wider staff because they've got a public advocate, but to those who are supporting them with the content because they're seeing stuff delivered. You know, it's a big morale boost.
Now, before we roll up, I just want to sort of look to the future. As Paul Keating used to say, you know, every galah in the pet shop is talking about artificial intelligence is really the conversation for communications people, whether it be visual, whether it be text, whether it be whatever. You know, there are all so many applications of this new technology, which is going to transform the function of communication without question. How are you dealing with that at the moment? What's your, as part of this master plan, where is your, what can you explain to us what the AI part of the master plan looks like?
Yeah, we're putting our toe in the water, and you know, there's a whole of government approach being formulated at the moment, and the Prime Minister did announce a partnership with Microsoft with Copilot about to get underway, which a number of agencies are involved in. We're not one of those at this point, but we're looking at how we do come on board. But the thing that we're putting our toe in the water with, we started a proof of concept last year, but I stress it's toe in the water stuff. What we're doing is we're using already available content on website and
on your website,
on our website, from our website, where we think we need to give it a spruce up or redo, and checking, you know, whether the readability and plain English is up to scratch. You know, with where existing web pages that might need to be updated. But I think, you know, going forward, you know, the real benefits are going to be much broader than that, and in drafting more content than reworking current content. And where the importance comes in, and my experts tell me regularly that the beauty of having really good content that is machine readable, one, it helps you people when they're looking for something and they look for it through search engines like Google, it's going to be more easy to discover, you know, through those. But it's also going to help capitalise on the other emerging technologies we've got, like with translations. Because if the content's spot on and can be translated and translated accurately, you know, straight away you're reaching those broader called audiences who need to consume something in in a different language. So there are certainly benefits. There's things to be wary about, but there's certainly benefits, and we'll be pretty keen to explore them. The other thing that we're exploring about, we'll be exploring with the Department of Finance, is a thing called rules as code.
Rules as
code.
Okay.
They've done some proof of concepts with it, and they did it looking back at the in the COVID space, in the vaccination space. And what that is, like, the best example is at the moment we've got a payment finder where you can put in a few details and, you might be eligible for this. Rules as code puts that on steroids. And so what it does, it can bring you back to location. So, like, for example, in the COVID era where there were different rules in different states, and, what do I need to do with my vaccination certificate? What vaccination do I get? What do I need to declare? You put in your a few more details, and it'll take it back to that location where you're inquiring from as to what the rules apply to you and what you might be eligible for and what you need to do. So we're definitely keen to be working with Department of Finance on how we might be able to explore that in the coming year.
5 years into the future, what's it going to look like? How's it going to be different? Are you still going to have 200 people, or are the machines going to have taken over? What parts of, where do you see the biggest change and the biggest challenge when you say 10 million interactions, the Australian citizen at the centre? How does your team change in 5 years' time?
Yeah, look, it's changing already, Pemby, and I don't think AI replaces the people. And if government hasn't learned anything from Robodebt, which we haven't really got a chance to talk about today, but if we haven't learned anything from Robodebt, is that you don't take the people out. So the AI can be a helper, but you still need, especially when you're talking about citizen entitlements, payments that they could potentially have for life, the support that they're getting, support at the toughest time of their lives, you need to have human oversight of what's happening. But what can happen is some of the dross work, that may be happening now, maybe the AI can pick up on that, so they can focus on the more strategic tasks. And it's not unlike, where we come from media monitoring. It wasn't that long ago where that was a human endeavour to do your media summaries, and now it's accepted the machines are doing most of that. So no, the humans are still going to be really important, but it's just going to be how we get information to people and where they get it. It's about having content wherever people are. They might be getting on their watches. They might be.
But this is the point, isn't it? Is it that the context is continuing to rapidly evolve and change, and if you're not, as you say, on the watch, on the face of the phone, you've got to be in that space, don't you? The requirement for the volume of content is going to be much greater.
Yeah, and that's where the reusable content is going to be really important, so that no matter where people are discovering it, whether it's through your partners, through whatever channel it is, who knows? Someone said to me the other day, we don't even know whether there'll be websites or not, eventually. So, but however it is that they get their info, they might be through some of those, WhatsApp style things, through messenger services, whatever. They get their messaging, that we have reusable content so that we can spit it into those channels.
Yeah. Now, listen, I will grab you on Robodebt before you go. Tell me that story from your point of view as a communications, as the general manager of communications at Services Australia.
Yeah, look, a very testing time for the agency, Pemby, and we're talking, like when it blew up as a national issue was over the summer of 2016, 2017. So it's a fair while ago, and like in between that we've had COVID. And when the Royal Commission was on last year, and I'm not downplaying it, the government did the right thing in having a Royal Commission to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But it did feel like, because there's a bit of shock and awe for everyone in what they were listening to, and we'd sort of already understood that. And it was a bit like, having been in a pre-recorded reality TV show that was shown a couple of years later, if that makes sense. In saying that, there were a couple of things for many of us that we learned in that Royal Commission. And we learned that there were people that lied to us. And there's a lot of us that are very angry about that. For our customers, for our staff who had to go through it, and then for everyone who was mopping up when it blew up, there was just so much unnecessary stress and angst. And as communicators, there were two things that were happening around that time, two big things. One we were involved in, or one we weren't. One was there were big age pension changes, and we'd been communicating for months on that. and that came in on the 1st of January in 2017, and it wasn't an issue because it had been communicated so well, and the leaders at the time realised when this thing blew up that age pension wasn't a problem, but this was a problem, and there'd been a decision made not to involve comps, back then. So I think pretty much while there's still things that need to be done, there was an immediate realisation that communications had to be more front and centre than what it was, and it was something that couldn't be compromised on. And I think within 6 months of that blowing up, we had the organisation had its first customer experience officer on board, and so that was it really was the start of where the customer centred stuff was happening in earnest. And so so it wasn't like we were sitting around for years going, okay, this was a thing and we didn't do anything about it. Like the lessons were immediate. But the thing that sticks in a lot of our crawls is that, there was a letter from the policy agency to the Ombudsman when they were looking at this in January of 2017. And the message in that was that it was legislatively squared away. In other words, it wasn't unlawful. And that's what we believe, and that's what we kept getting told. And even when there were people coming out later in that year and sort of, really questioning it hardly, the legality of it, we were going back to people and saying, are we sure? Are we sure? And we were being told, no, nothing to see here. And clearly we saw there was something to see, and that the concept of income averaging, it was illegal, unlawful. That for us, there were people knew at the time when the whole country's eyes were on it at the start of January 2017, and the plug could have been pulled then, and it wasn't. Yeah, there's a lot of anger about that.
A tough time, but as you say, some positive has come from that. That's interesting that you say that the customer experience team started its journey from that horrible experience, both for you and your team, but also for the agency and for the people who were affected. So just for our guests overseas, robo-debt was a policy of the government which basically was about sort of clawing back from people payments that had been made to them. The computer basically said, give us the money back, when they shouldn't have been asking for that. But goes to the point also, doesn't it, about the lesson about, the people who've got to be there. But also integrity, because I think that is another key issue around trust in the public service. And I think this has been a huge issue for the Australian public service to understand that integrity is at the core of the work that public servants do. And without it, problems happen when people don't act with integrity.
Yeah, and the recommendations that have been brought down have been acted on by government and across government. It's beyond our agency. It's gone into the processes of cabinet, of appeals tribunals, a whole range of aspects of government. So.
Yeah, well, the values of the APS, the new value of stewardship, which is going to be introduced, as part of it as well. So anyway, moving on from there. But really, mate, thanks for coming in. Thanks for having a conversation. A great story, so many lessons in your wonderful career. That curiosity that you learnt as a kid, the importance of mentors, culture, ideas can come from anywhere. Test and learn, be curious about that. And, if things are going to work and can work better, ideas can come from anywhere. How do we make that happen? Whole of government, working collaboratively, so much to it. So congratulations on all the success. Certainly all the way back, basically you've had a wonderful, varied, important and incredible, really, in many ways, career. And where to from here? How many more years have you got left in you?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, Pemby. I in a bit of a sweet spot. I really love the team we work with. They're so committed, and I don't think I've worked with a team as strong as this in my career. So when it's like that, you you want it to keep going.
And it's exciting too, isn't it? With so much change, technology driving change. When you have a culture of experimentation and interest, you're going to find people are going to go, hey, why don't we do it this way? Let's have a go. Does it work? Does it not work? And for someone like you, that must be incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, and it's helpful that, for our team as well, that our advice is valued now. We haven't always had those opportunities. Communications teams across the world, would have known the vagaries of...
No longer the colouring in department.
Yeah, well, it's exactly right. And what I'd say about that is that none of us should take any of that for granted. We've now got bigger voices than we've had before. We need to, use it wisely and take those opportunities. I remember interviewing a first grade coach when I was a cadet journalist, and I was asking about some rookie coming through, and it must have been a bit of a dud question because I asked him what sort of role he was going to play on the weekend, and he just said to me, "Look, he's not here for a haircut." And so it is about that. We're at the table now. We've got we need to make the most of that opportunity, give great advice. We know in our game it's there's always more than one way to skin a cat, because it's about judgment, and it's about creativity, about how you problem solve, giving options that can make the most of that voice that we now have. And as you can see, I'm not here, clearly not here for a haircut.
So, neither am I.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I think to your point again about that voice, and I've mentioned it, and I do mention it regularly on the podcast because it is important, the fact that the OECD is now looking at public sector communication as an enabling tool for government to deliver benefit to citizens is a fantastic thing. Such an important organisation is now treating it seriously, investing resources and encouraging learnings, encouraging global conversations, because again, a lot of the learning does transfer, as we've seen, and congratulations on the success that you've had with those global results, which are ranking Australia pretty well, but I'm sure you'll be competitive. Fourth place, probably not good enough. Don't get a medal for fourth. So we'll be looking for the gold medal, no doubt. So thanks, mate. Thanks for coming in. And indeed, we've had some feedback from someone during the week, a member of our audience, Vikas Sharma from the ANU. He said, and I quote, "David, I go through the podcasts that you share sometimes and I get fascinated by the wealth of knowledge that stays in them." So thank you to your team. On behalf of the audience, because we really enjoy it. And certainly I know, Vickers, you will enjoy this two-part conversation that we have had with Bevan Hannan. We needed to be two parts because we had a lot to cover. So I'm delighted that he was able to come in and share many of his stories with us today and to share them with you, the audience, because there is value to you. Now, a rating or review, if you've got the time, always helps us to be found. Very grateful for that. Doesn't take long. If you're getting value like Vickers, please, as I say, it does help us to be found by those machines that Bevan was talking about before. Thanks for Bevan Hannan for coming in. Thanks to you for coming back once again. We'll be back at the same time in a fortnight, but for the moment, it's bye for now.
You've been listening to the GovComms podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes.